I live on a farm outside of a town that currently has a population of around 1,700. It's a small community that was built along the railroad back in the late 1800s. Most of the original buildings are still standing along Main Street. Some of them are pretty cool, and over the years, I have explored most of them. My favorite was a large building that was a flower store, as well as doubling as a phone/service store. The flower shop took up the entire first floor, while the phones and service used the entire basement. At the time, I was around 10 years old, and my father was working with the phone guy over the winter. After school, I would walk around about a mile through the snow. I would wait around in the flower shop for about 4 hours till I could get a ride back to the farm with my dad. I would get quite bored in there, being a kid, so I would just come up with things to do. I would draw on my sketch pad or hang out in my little mock-up office that I had constructed in the back rooms. One day, however, I found this door in the basement. I asked the guy my dad worked with what it led to, and he unlocked it for me, revealing a very old rope elevator. You know, the kind that you stand on, you pull down on the rope and down you go. He told me to get on it, and so I did. He then proceeded to take us up to the upper level of the building. The upper door led to a hallway with a door at the end of it. He showed me that the door had a tiny hatch at about adult eye level. I was then told that this place was used for drinking in the days of the Prohibition. People wanting to get in and drink would have to talk their way in through that little hatch. The room on the other side of the door was huge. It had a long, old-style bar. There was obviously a dance floor and other things that you'd expect. There were lots of cobwebs and dust from the years that it had remained unused. This place, it amazed me. The history of the upper level of a flower shop. That's what got me started on exploring. Over the years, I managed to get inside almost all the buildings that were located on Main Street. A couple had been converted to small apartments, so I couldn't look into those. The upper level of the furniture store was great. It too appeared to be used for drinking back in the Prohibition days. There was one building that I kept on wanting to get into but never could. That building was the old movie theatre. It was located on the end of Main Street. The theatre was used right around the time motion pictures came out, but it caught fire and was burned pretty bad. Quite a few people died when this happened. They did fix it up and tried to get the movies going again, but nobody wanted to go to the shows there. They'd rather travel the 20 miles to a nearby city, so the theatre was shut down for good. This was around the late 1930s, I believe. So, this thing had sat with its door locked for the better part of 70 years. I wanted to get into this building badly. It took me quite a few years to gain access to it. Many years later, I was finally able to get in. I was older, more experienced, ready to give it a shot. The other buildings I had explored were still being used, so I would just ask for permission from the owners. This one, however, would be illegal to get into. I had to wait until about 2 a.m, when the town was dead quiet. The streetlights go off at 2 a.m, so that's my chance to get in unnoticed. I used a crowbar to wrench the padlock setup that they had on the door off. There was just a single door in the front, so I had to use that. The door opened up, revealing stairs going down into what I called extreme darkness. You know how you can stand in the dark and still kind of see after your eyes adjust? Well, in this kind of dark, you couldn't see a damn thing. It was like being in a cave, because there was absolutely no light down there. Thankfully, I had remembered to bring a mag light and a lantern, so it wasn't that big a deal. I made my way down the steps, making sure to close the door on my way down. I didn't want anybody to know I was there, since it was, in fact, trespassing. The stairs led down quite a ways. Soon, the hot, humid summer air ended and was replaced with cold, dank air. It was quite a relief, actually. The air was pretty stagnant, however. Anyway, the stairs leading down met up with a short sort of hallway, then stairs leading up. It didn't make any sense to me then, and really still doesn't now. I walked up those stairs and I came to another door. Thankfully, there was no lock on it, nor the handle. I simply pushed it open and walked into the room. The room I entered was the lobby, a moderately large room with a booth for tickets and some old chairs fixed to the floor. The lobby didn't yield anything interesting, so I marched onwards. I walked down a narrow hallway, and eventually I came to the screen room. It wasn't very large at all. It was about the size of a 2-car garage. The screen was gone, but the seats were still all intact. There was no projector room that I could see, just a fixed metal stand in the back of the room. I assumed that that's where the film projector must have sat on. I looked around there for a while, and I found an old wheat penny. Finally, this exploration was paying off. I walked back to the lobby to check out a doorway that I'd seen before. The light from my lantern illuminated a padlock on this door. That must mean there's some pretty good stuff behind it. I pry off the lock and open the door. Inside is a small room that clearly used to be an office. There's an old rotting desk in it, a wooden chair, and newspapers lying all over the floor. I tried to look further at some of the newspapers, but the years of humidity had gotten to their print. There was nothing else of interest in the desk, and the only framed picture on the wall was a painting of a flower pot. There was another door at the end of the office though, so I moved on to that. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The door was warped pretty bad. I had to shoulder it a couple of times just to get it to pop open. When it did, I almost tumbled over. Behind the door were more steps leading down. I figured this must be the basement. I made my way down those creaky old stairs, and I walked into a very large room. It was something I could compare to a basketball court in my mind. Scattered through the room were old brick pillars that made up the support for the building. Some of them were in pretty bad shape, but still appeared to be holding strong. As I'm checking out one of the pillars, I clearly hear the pitter-patter of feet off in the darkness behind me. I whip out the mag light and I shone it around. I couldn't see anything, however. I chalked it up to my imagination and I continued my exploring. First, I checked out what would be the north end of the room, and I saw a bunch of stuff under sheets. I pulled them off to find chairs stacked up neatly. Nothing too interesting there. Next to the chairs were some boxes with old movie reels in them. I really wanted to take one with me, but I didn't do that. I may be trespassing, but I'm not a thief. More pattering off in the distance alarmed me. I called out to determine if anyone was back there. I met with silence. I had thought at this stage that someone had followed me down here, or that maybe there was some kind of animal down here with me. The mag light didn't shine that far as it normally would, so the light beam would cut out after about 8 feet. I couldn't get a good view of everything that was around me. I was on guard, since I knew that something, no matter how big or small, was in there. I started walking towards the noise, with the flashlight and the lantern glowing. I reached a wall, and I didn't see anything. I didn't know what to think at that point. It is an old building though, so it could have just been random noises that old buildings tend to make. I decided to walk towards the east wall and check out anything that might be over there. I get there, and I find a ton of wooden boxes piled up to the ceiling, which was about 7 feet high. I start grabbing them off the top and checking their contents. There's nothing inside the boxes. All of the ones I searched through are empty. When I got down to about 4 feet, I see something behind where I'd just pulled the box from. It's the outline of a hole. This interested me greatly. I quickly removed the other boxes that were along the wall, and I was soon greeted with a large hole in the wall. It's about 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It wasn't neatly cut out of the wall either. It seemed that bricks were torn from the foundation to reveal this hole. I shine my light down there, and I can now see a tunnel. It's very crudely made. It looked like something that you'd see in a prison escape movie. Rough walls lined it, and it was kind of circular. The floor of it was flat though. It took me all of about half a second to decide to explore it. A tunnel underneath the town. How often do you find something like that? I muttered to myself. I hunched over and I stepped into the tunnel. Only a couple of feet in, I heard that pattering noise behind me once again. I look over my shoulder and I see nothing. Shrugging it off, I continue into the tunnel. After about 10 feet into the tunnel, it began to shrink a little. Now, it was about 3.5 feet tall. For a 6-foot person at the time, that is quite a strain, and I did begin to feel the creep of claustrophobia setting in. I hunched over and started slowly moving forward. Around 20 feet in, the tunnel took a sharp turn to the left. Then, after about another 20 feet, it opened up into a small room. Well, not really a room, more like a bigger, wider opening. I noticed 2 tunnels cut off from this one, and I decided to take the one on the right. I stepped into the room, and I heard crunching coming from under my feet. I looked down to see skeletons of all sorts of critters. I'm not a doctor or archaeologist or any of that, but they looked like kind of rat or rabbit skeletons. This spooked me a bit. Off on the other side of the room, near the right tunnel, was a decaying animal. I could only assume that there was another way into this system of tunnels, if animals were getting in. I walked over the skeletons and went through the right tunnel. It was a winding thing. Every few feet, I would have to turn one way or the other. I walked a bit further, and I felt breeze on my sweaty face. I must have found that opening that I was thinking about. Sure enough, there was a chunk about the size of a couple of shoeboxes missing out of the ceiling. I shone my light upwards, and I saw rounded concrete. I must be under a culvert or something like that. I walked onward, and I'm soon met with a collapsed section. Well, that's encouraging, I remarked to myself. I turned around, and I started to head back to the bones room. But I felt these vibrations all of a sudden. I shone the light around, and I saw some rocks tumbling from around the collapsed section. A roaring noise then echoed through the tunnel. I recognized that sound. It was a tractor. Must be driving on the road near the culvert. I found it strange that this thing is so shallow where I am. I hadn't even noticed that I was slowly moving upwards when I was going up that tunnel. I walked back to the bones room. I looked down at my feet to make sure that I hadn't stepped in that decaying thing. But it was gone. Did I miss something? I shone the light around the little room and it was nowhere to be seen. After that, I did the only logical thing. I stepped into the other tunnel, branching off from the room. Now, this one was really small. I had to crawl through it on my hands and knees. Because of this, I wasn't able to bring the lantern in the room and I just started crawling. This was not fun at all. There were all sorts of sharp little rocks that my hands and knees were going over, and I was wearing shorts at the time. I crawled about 30 feet in this tunnel and stopped to take a breather. I was able to sit down hunched over. A minute later, my ears picked up a sound. It was a crunching sound. I stopped breathing so I can listen better. The sound is coming from the direction I was heading. I turn the flashlight on and I shine it down the tunnel. Eyes. A pair of eyes, about 20 feet away. This thing, it looks hairless, skeletal, monkey. It whips up, it sees the light, and it disappears in a flash. I had seen enough. I quickly shuffled around and was met face to face with this thing. it lets out this horrible, what I can only describe as a bark at me. I jumped up and I slammed my head into the ceiling above me. I writhed in pain and I felt blood pouring out of a cut in my head. I must have hit a sharp rock. I started crawling as fast as I could towards the bones room. I get back to the little room and shone the light back into the darkness. About 10 feet away is that thing. It's licking the ground where my blood had trailed. It just keeps licking, but it stares at me as it does so. I get up and I tried to run through the bones room, but I tripped and scrambled to stand up in all these dead animals. I ran to the tunnel and I ducked so I can head straight into it. I didn't duck well enough. Bam! My forehead smacks into the wall. That knocks me on my ass. Now, my head is in some serious pain. I can't tell if I'm bleeding from my forehead because my face is already covered in blood from a minute earlier. I ignored the pain as best I could, and I made haste running down the tunnel. My breathing was frantic. This was too much for me. I burst out of the tunnel and into the basement of the theatre. I began flinging wooden boxes in front of the tunnel in a vain attempt to block whatever was in there. I get a bunch piled in front and start hustling for the stairs. It's never that easy though, is it? I get there and the stairs are gone. Just a wall. What in the name of God is going on? As it turns out though, I had just run to the wrong wall. A quick sprint to another wall revealed the staircase. I started to run up it, but I hear boxes smashing behind me. I booked it up the stairs because right after the smashing boxes came the sound of loud pattering, almost like a dog's paws on concrete. I made it back into the office and I slammed the door. I kicked it and kicked it again till the warping did its natural locking effect. Not even a second later, the door began thumping as if something was banging into it. Then, a clawing noise. I ran over and I shoved the desk in front of the door. I did all this while holding my poor MacLeod. If I had brought some plastic piece of shit, it would have been dark by the time I scrambled out of that tunnel. I stepped back and I watched the door and the desk shudder as something continuously pounded into it. Then, the pounding stopped as suddenly as it had started. Then there was just silence. That didn't last long, however. I heard a clicking noise off in the distance. It sounded mechanical. I walked out into the lobby and the noise grew. What in the hell is that noise? It was coming from the screen room. My curiosity got the best of me, even after all of that. I walked to the hallway and saw the glow of light from the screen room. Is someone in there? I asked myself. The second I entered the room, I saw a huge light square where the movie screen would be. It was coming from a non-existent projector. The light just started from mid-air and cast itself onto the brick wall where the screen should be. I stood in amazement, watching this unbelievable thing unfold. Soon, I could hear the sounds of crying all around me. I snapped out of the hypnosis that the light seemed to have over me, and I glanced around. There was no one there, but the crying was still happening. It wasn't distant or weird. It just sounded like people all around you were tearing up. I began to walk backwards to the hall. As soon as I reached the door leading out of the screen room, I heard something different. The cries had stopped and erupted into screaming. The light from the non-existent projector turned blood red, and it coated the entire room. That was enough. I ran back into the lobby and towards the way out. I glanced over at the office as I ran past it, and I saw the door fly open and the desk go skidding across the room. Shit, that thing had gotten out. I ran down the steps to the exit. Behind me, I could hear a sound that was a mix between a snarl and a gurgle. The thing was chasing me. Soon, I was running up to the door leading outside. I sprinted up the steps and flew through the door into the outside world. I looked back just in time to see the thing leaping towards the door at me. It disappeared as soon as it hit the doorway. I fell down to my hands and knees, trying to catch my breath. My kneeling turned into laying on the sidewalk. My head was pounding, and my face was sticky from blood. My hands and knees were covered in cuts and scrapes from my rapid exit out of the tunnel. I stood up, and I shut the door to the theatre. Nothing was ever going to get me to go back in there. I walked back to my vehicle, and I remembered that I had left my lantern in the bone room. Oh well, it was a $30 Coleman, easily replaceable. I then just drove home and nursed my wounds. About a year later, the city council decided to demolish a building that was 2 down from the theatre. After destroying the foundation, they found a branch to the system of tunnels I was in. It was quite the big discovery, and it hit the newspapers soon after it was found. The newspapers said that the tunnels were not even known about by any current living resident. They were old and decrepit. The part of the article that caught my eye, though, was their speculation on why there was a modern-day lantern in that tunnel. I just chuckled at that. The branch they discovered must have been the one that I was heading down when I saw that thing. The tunnels are still there. The council decided to leave them be, since they presented no danger to the buildings around them. However, they are now watched over very well, since they don't want any meddling kids getting into them. Doesn't matter to me though. No way in hell am I ever going back down there.